Hey, it's Andy Yanez, and you're listening or watching to another episode of Pawd Slama Jama. For the second straight week, we are live, and we will be talking about the University of Houston Cougars football team, what they did during the bye week, looking ahead at the matchup against Navy, and we'll conclude with some men's basketball talk, obviously coming off the heels of the first AP poll of the 2022-23 season. They were ranked third in the country. That's right, Houston, third in the country. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Pawd Slama Jama.
Got high standards, high goals, and we know what it takes to get there.
I want to be unguardable, if I'm honest.
Coaches coach, players play.
And that's a great place to be in your life. So you can care less what other people think.
As always, I am Andy Yanez, being joined by Da'Yon Dunlap. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, what's good, family and all as well? How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing great. I can't complain. And let's get right into it. And when it comes to the University of Houston Cougars football team, they're coming off the heels of their bye week. And before that, a very exciting win on the road at Memphis that they're hoping can breed momentum for them heading into their third conference game of the season against the Navy Midshipmen, who we'll talk about in the next upcoming segment. We know how tricky they are to defend when it comes to what they do on offense, and Dana Holgorsen talked about them on defense, how they like to disguise a lot of the stuff they do on that side of the ball as well. But when it comes to the bye week in particular, obviously when we think of bye, we think of a break from an outside perspective, no game week. But the players, the staff actually said it is a bit of a break in terms of not having to prepare specifically for an opponent, but it's not necessarily we're off for the week. Dana Holgorsen said the players still had to practice during the week. They had a couple of days off towards the end of the week. And linebacker Donovan Mutin, who's one of not only the key players on the defense, but one of the key veterans on the team, talked about how it was crucial for him to not allow the bye week to get in that break mindset. Make sure you're staying focused, preparing your body, and really gearing up for the final 6 regular season games of the season. Houston's currently sitting at 1-1 in conference play, which stacks them up right in the middle of the American Athletic Conference. They're 7th by ranking, but they are tied at 500 with 4 other programs, and they're behind Cincinnati, UCF, and Tulane for that top spot in the American Athletic Conference. All 3 of those teams are undefeated, but all 3 of those teams will play each other for the tail end of the season. So at this point, really, the only thing the Houston Cougars can do is take care of their business and see where the cards lay at the end of the season. Dan, I'm going to go into a clip from Dana Holgorsen when it comes to evaluations of the team at the bye week, because that was kind of the trending topic heading into the bye week. What adjustments will the Houston Cougars make, whether it's offensively, defensively? And Dana Holgorsen had an interesting soundbite. Here's what he had to say when asked about bye week evaluation. Dana, after that game against Memphis, you talked about, with the bye week, it's always a good point in time to be able to evaluate what happened during the first 6 games. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that process. I'm sure it had to be, going back, watching film, what went well, what didn't. What was that process like just in terms of evaluating at the bye?
Oh, I just think that's too broad of a question to answer, to be honest with you. I'd give you something, but you do self-scout stuff every week. You go back and you look at where you're at, but what are you able to fix? That's an off-season question more than anything, So, the first half of the season has been competitive. Are we happy we're sitting here at 3-3? No. I mean, a couple of those games could have went either way. We could be 5-1. We could be 1-5. If we win at Tech, are we in a better place against Kansas? Probably. Does that have a difference in the outcome of the game? Maybe. I don't know. Ball bounces your way sometimes, like it did the last time that we played. Be happy about it. Use it to your advantage and get ready to prepare to go play the next game. It's always about what your preparation is for the next game. Mid-season assessments are fun to talk about, and you do some things self-scouting wise. What you can actually do about it is kind of tough.
There you heard head coach Dana Holgorsen from the soundbite, a very interesting soundbite. Was there anything that stuck out to you, Da'Yon, just from that clip of Holgorsen?
I mean, not much. He really didn't really touch up on much. He kind of said they kind of self-scout every week, in which you kind of expect that on a week-to-week basis. It's kind of it's not surprising. I wasn't really surprised, and nothing really stuck out. It was kind of a bland response. He kind of gave me something like he said, but I mean, it wasn't really much. I mean, I'm sure bye week they're off but game, but I'm sure they put a lot of work in film, lifting weights, getting stronger. Some players resting, things like that.
Absolutely. And I asked a similar question to Doug Belk, and he gave me a bit of a better response, a much more in-depth response. But he talked about how really they use that bye week to be able to get specific focuses just in terms of what they can get better at. He said that there were, in particular, 3 different areas that they focused on during the bye week, and that was getting better at late game scenarios, specifically situational football, red zone execution, and 2-minute execution. And the last thing they did focus on was third down situations. And when you hear that from Doug Belk, those are areas, not just the defense, but offensively as well. Just the team overall has struggled in a lot of those first 6 games of the season. I mean, 5 of those 6 games have come down to the final possession, and even going back to Memphis, where they were able to pull off the stops that they hadn't been able to the last couple of really the first 6 games of the season. I guess prior to that Memphis game, the first 5. It's a momentum that they're trying to build, and it's good to hear from Belk that they really focused in on those during that bye week.
And that's exactly what I've been saying. On Let's Raise Cougars on our podcast of them getting better at situational football and complementary football. And so it was good to hear him say that, and kind of and which I know he's a good coach. I know film doesn't lie when he goes back. He's being realist with his players on different scenarios and situations like that. And so I like the defense has played good. There's another step that they can get to play better. I know his availability. He talked about the loss of Art Green out for the rest of the year, right? Is that who's out?
No, Alex Hogan.
Alex Hogan. Yeah, Hogan. I mean, Alex Hogan. Yeah, it's Alex Hogan is out for the rest of the year, so filling in with that. But I think overall, this bye week came at a good time, and it was good to come off a win, so it's kind of some positive morale around the team, and they can kind of go into the second half of the season with some positivity going forward.
For sure. And really when it comes to the bye week, something that a lot of fans were kind of interested in was the offense, because we saw, again, going back to that Memphis game where, I mean, the offense had some bright spots before the fourth quarter, especially towards the end of the first half. And I caveat that because they were able to drive down the field at the end of the first half, couldn't punch it in for a touchdown. It looked like they were going to settle for a field goal, and then Bubba Baxa botched the kick. Well, it wasn't just on Baxa. The laces were facing towards the kicker, and but the kick was wide, was very wide on that attempt. So the Cougars came away with no points on that drive. But in that fourth quarter in particular, that's really where the Cougars saw a lot more from an offensive explosion standpoint. They put up 26 points against Memphis. They overcame that 19-point deficit. And I mean, give kudos again. One of the things that Belk said is there was a spark for that team against Memphis was that Clayton Tune scramble towards the end. It wasn't even towards the end. I think it was, I can't remember if it was before the Jace Rogers 100-yard return, kickoff return touchdown, or right before it or right after it. But there was a situation where it was a 4th and long. Yeah, it was a 4th and long, and it looked like Tune was going to get sacked by a couple of times, and then it looked like he was going to get tackled short of the sticks, and he picked up the first down. He rushed, I believe it was for 15 yards, and then they had another 4th down situation where this time he scrambled, didn't pick up the first down with his legs, but he was able to buy time with his legs to be able to hit a receiver down the field. Then lo and behold, Keyshawn Carter came up big for Houston in that fourth quarter. He got 2 touchdowns, including the go-ahead touchdown late in that game against Memphis. And again, they're hoping that can springboard them into a good run to end this season when it comes to conference play. But in particular, when it comes to that offense, a lot of fans have been calling for much more of an up-tempo style. And here's Dana Holgorsen talking specifically about potentially seeing that from the offense.
Do you feel like this offense is more productive up-tempo, or is it still a sort of a situational type deal?
Yeah, it's situational. I'm not going to commit to to a fastball offense for the sake of just running a fastball offense. I think that's easy to defend. A lot of people do it, and a lot of people know how to defend it. So, I think we've got a plan with what we want to do offensively. We did go into that game wanting to pick up the pace some. We had talked about that. We're not going to just sit here and not change anything, regardless of my comments a couple weeks ago. I mean, we are going to continue to try to change things and spark us. And that was one of the things that we focused on, in the Memphis game. Our inability to be able to operate a 1-minute drill towards the end of Tulane, not only made everybody mad, it made me mad, so we worked on that, and it showed in the game. I mean, right before half, we drove it all the way down the field in less than a minute and ran out of time to score a touchdown, but should have got points. And then at the end of the game, obviously, we had the 2 1-minute drives that looked good. We've won a lot of games around here with controlling the ball, controlling the clock, keeping our defense fresh, keeping them off the field, not putting them in bad situations. I'm not going to stop doing that just for the sake of people wanting to see an up-tempo offense. We need to be effective in an up-tempo offense when it's time to be up-tempo. Yeah, if we're sputtering, doing what we're doing, then that's an opportunity to be able to pick things up. We'll have the ability to be able to do that. I'm not going to commit to it full time.
Once again, there you heard Dana Holgorsen not willing to commit to a fast-paced offense. And Da'Yon, before we go ahead to the Clayton Tune clip, where it kind of along those lines with what Dana Holgorsen said. So you heard right there, he's not willing to commit to it. It's going to be interesting when you hear Clayton Tune talk about it, because he said he feels that Houston excels more when they're in an up-tempo style. Now, he is going to mirror the comments that Holgorsen said, where they don't want to fully commit to that being their identity. I think it makes sense. It certainly makes sense where they don't kind of want to pigeonhole themselves and, this is what we're going to do every time we have the ball. We're going to push it down the field. But what say you? What were your thoughts on hearing Dana Holgorsen talk right there?
I mean, just like you said, I think you don't want to give up your philosophy, but obvious on film has been working. And also, I think it's truthful when he's saying you don't want to commit to it like that being your philosophy and your game plan to do that all quarters. So I think it's good at being versatile, having that time management idea, or like running the football and time of possession, control of time of possession, as well as in spurts, speeding it up. So I think it's good to be versatile and having the ability to do both. But I think it's a season by season. I think that's what makes good coaches. You adapt to year by year. You don't just input your system on each team year by year. This is what I do. This is what we do. You adjust, in my opinion, to your team year by year, your personnel on what they do well as a group. And if that's what they do well, then maybe you sprinkle a little bit more of that. And so, and I'm sure he will. I mean, I'm giving him a chance, but I think he don't want to just come out and be like, yeah, we're going to commit to do it. So I would like to see more of it, though, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an interesting standpoint, I mean, we talked about it during the training camp, that's something, like you said, that Dana Holgorsen really liked to control the time of possession. And it's something that it wasn't on that clip, but he talked about how in the past they've won a lot of games being able to control the time of possession. And so far, just in the 2022 season, Houston has won the time of possession battle in 3 games. They're 2-1 in those games. They won the time of possession battle against UTSA and Rice. And I will say that Rice, they won the time of possession by 10 seconds. So it was really 50-50 with the Owls. And then even though they won the time of possession battle against Tulane, obviously they lost that game in the overtime period. So, I mean, that right there kind of helps build his argument. I agree with you where you pointed out he's not going to flat out and say, hey, Navy, we're going to be throwing the ball all the time. But here's what quarterback Clayton Tune had to say about that same question when it comes to their offense.
2-minute drills and the late game situations, but is that maybe where this offense really flourishes sometimes, when you can do some stuff like that?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I think when we pick up the pace, pick the tempo up, I think it is an advantage for us. I feel like we play well in that situation, and it's harder on the defense. They're not able to sub and get the different defenses called that they want to. So it's an advantage for us in that regard. And I think it's something that we're going to do more of, but that's not our identity. We don't want to be the team that, strictly does that type of, that style of offense, but we're definitely going to mix it in some more.
To like change a play if you see something from the defense, or is that all the coaches that like they call the plays and you don't have that flexibility?
It depends. Certain plays I do, and then certain plays I don't. So it's different week to week, the amount of plays that I have the ability to do so and the amount that I don't. So when we're playing a team that plays a lot of man coverage in the back end, then I have free reign to check, whatever routes that I want that I feel like would work best, versus that man coverage or leverage or whatever it is. And then there's other times, where we have set plays that we want to, we don't necessarily know what the defense is going to do. So we have plays that, we're going to run regardless. So it just kind of varies week to week.
So they're right there, Da'Yon. That's one of the questions that you had in one of the previous Let's Rage Cougs shows. So there you heard it right there. It varies game by game, but Clayton Tune in some instances does have the flexibility to call audibles and change plays, particularly if the defenses are playing man-to-man and they see something. So that's something that, I mean, you like to hear from your fifth-year quarterback. They have the trust in him there. But going back to the previous portion of that clip where he talks about being more of a pass-first offense. Now, again, he kind of mirrored a little bit of what Holgorsen said, but he also said that he feels that they're more effective while they're passing the ball more. And he said that you could see the team trending in that direction. Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back into my previous comment. I think he's saying it would treat more in that direction because that's what's been successful.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Brandon Campbell's banged up, and also
Tajon Henry had that ankle surgery.
He's banged up, as well as the other running back. He has a shoulder issue as well, and so all your running backs are banged up, and so I think by
necessity.
by necessity they're going to have to end up passing, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. I don't think so. But like Clayton said, he don't think that would make them their identity for them to do that. And I think it's good to be versatile. I think in spurts, if the run is working and they getting drop coverage where it's double safety in the background, I mean in the secondary and their drop safeties, you got 5 in the box, 6 in the box, you got numbers, and then I think they will run the football and be committed to doing that. So, and like you said, it's a game basis. But I think when it comes down to it, especially with Tank, I think he needs more targets, more receptions, more times for him to make explosive plays. I mean, he's that electric and he's that good. I mean, I watch games with other receivers on Saturdays and Sundays, and where they have receivers like that, playmakers like that, they force feed them to get the ball in their hands in different ways. And I think we haven't really done that much this year.
Absolutely. And I think, right there, the interesting point, I'm going to bring up a comment that was brought up by Michael Amaya, who's one of our viewers from the YouTube portion of our podcast. Is let the offense play what is going to put points on the board. If we want the defense to get rest, maybe they should stop somebody and let them march down the field. Right there, that
offense just goes 3 and out or something.
Yeah, and that's really been the big thing that's kind of hurt Houston overall, that inconsistency. And another question that Michael asked, why has the Cougars, why have they not been effective much at all? And I think, one of the things, and we've talked about it all season, one of the first factors is the penalties that have cost them. There's been multiple times during the season where they get big plays. I mean, they get big chunk plays, and then there's a flag on the field, and the holding, it's a costly penalty that has to bring back the play, and usually it ends up putting them in a 2nd and 20, 3rd and 20 situation, which is really hard to overcome. But some of the other things, and Da'Yon, you touched on this too. I mean, at times, especially if they want to establish the run and really dominate in the trenches, they haven't really been able to have a lot of push consistently throughout the season. That's going to be something that they're going to be looking to excel at during the final 6 games of the regular season.
They're going to have to, because you can't be one-dimensional offense, and that's where I think Holgorsen hinted at when he said it's easier to defend, because they can just play one base coverage and they know you're going to do one thing happen. So once again, I kind of sound like a broken record, but it's good to have a versatile offense. It's good to have a balanced offense, to have the threat of run, whether it's being successful or not, the threat that you're actually running the football, and then you might hit a run for 20, 30 yards like Brandon Campbell did in the last game. And that's just to keep the defense honest, to allow them to know that you're going to do it. And then runs like Clayton that he make. And so you still need that run element of the offense versus being just a pass happy, in my opinion. But you do have the air raid. And so I think it's a different variation of the air raid versus what you see with Leach, and where he's just pass every play.
Yeah, for sure. But that's going to do it for this segment. Coming right up on Pawd Slama Jama, we'll talk more specifically about the upcoming matchup against the Navy Midshipmen. We'll hear from Doug Belk and what challenges they pose from the defensive perspective, what Houston's going to have to be ready for on their offensive side of the ball. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Pawd Slama Jama. And I will take this moment to plug Let's Rage Cougs, the unofficial postgame show of UH Athletics. We are live after each and every football, and we're about 2.5 weeks until the tip-off of the men's basketball season, November 7th. That will be the first men's basketball post-game show of Let's Rage Cougs. We're taking sponsorships now, so anyone that's interested, please be sure to email letsragecougs@gmail.com. We do all kinds of sponsorships, whether you're interested in sponsoring a post-game clip of the head coaches from Dana Holgorsen, Calvin Sampson once the men's basketball season rolls around. If you're interested in having a banner spot in the show, like you see right there in the corner, the Pawd Slama Jama logo, something similar to that, where your name of the business is right there in the corner. Maybe you're just interested in sponsoring a specific segment, the comment section hotline. We just had comments from Michael Amaya. That is a whole bunch of different things that we can do during the Let's Rage Cougs post-game show. Once again, we will be back October 22nd with the football season, and the men's basketball season that tips off November 7th at the Fertitta Center against Northern Colorado. And on that note, Da'Yon, we are back. We're going to be focusing specifically on the upcoming matchup with Navy entering this game. Houston sits exactly at 500. And it's pretty interesting that Houston had their bye week exactly at the midway point of their season. They've played 6 games already. They have 6 games left, at least when it comes to regular season games. And they're exactly at 500. They're 3-3 on the regular season. They're 1-1 in the American Athletic Conference. And they're going to take on a very tricky Navy team that always seems to pose a lot of problems just in terms of their offense. They're coming in to the matchup at 2-4. They're also 500 in the American, but they are 2-2 against American Athletic Conference opponents. Pretty interesting stats overall on the series. Houston leads the series against Navy all-time 6-2. And at Navy, which is where the game will be played in Maryland, in Annapolis, Maryland, Houston leads the series 2-1 in Annapolis. So a couple of interesting things. Another interesting stat, Houston is 45-17 in October. So, I mean, they have history on their side, but we'll get right into the clip of defensive coordinator Doug Belk and what the challenges the Navy poses when it comes to their offense. How it is just in general to prepare for what they do on offense. They run that unique type of offense.
Yeah, just when you look at them statistically, number one in time of possession, they're going to possess the ball. They're going to go for it on 4th down. They believe in their scheme. They believe in their players, have smart physical players. What's the really interesting thing is they're number 3 in the country in yards per completion. So a lot of explosive plays in the back end. It tests your eyes as far as the discipline that you have to play with consistently with quarterback dive, pitch, and then you add the shifts, the motions, and the play action passes onto that. It's very difficult to defend. Top 10 in rushing. And so it's going to be a task. I think the quarterback is obviously what always makes these offenses go, and I think their quarterback is really good, different than guys they've had in the past. He's 6'2". I think he's somewhere around 225. Has a lot of arm talent. Throws the ball really good. Does a lot of different. They do a lot of different things with him as far as not only the traditional option offense, but you see him in spread sets. They get a shotgun, so they've really expanded what they do. As far as schematics, but the toughness and the discipline and the execution is still the same. The one place that they really have, shown to be explosive is, their slot backs. The running backs have a lot of explosive plays, 23, 24. The guys are on the perimeter getting the ball, whether it's a pitch or a toss, or even in the pass game, those guys are very explosive and have top end speed and play physical. And their fullback leads their team in rushing, and he's the bruiser of the group. And so that's really the task at hand for us. And up front, they play a lot of different guys. They got a couple returning starters, but they're all kind of the same. They're quick, they're physical, they're athletic, and they're tough. And so that's the task for us this week.
So there you heard defensive coordinator Doug Belk kind of give a good breakdown of Navy and what they like to do on offense, and something that Donovan Mutin, he was asked about really how can you prepare for Navy and specifically that triple option offense, and he kept it straight. There's not really much they can do to prepare just in terms of getting that speed. He said obviously they're going to practice it. In practice, they're going to see the look, but something Donovan Mutin said that first time you see it on the field, you can't really quite simulate that speed. And it's an adjustment period that they're going to have to quickly pick up on Saturday when they take on the Midshipmen. And you heard right there from the clip and Doug Belk, and really the credit he gave quarterback Tai Lavatai for Navy, who is, like you mentioned right there, he's done a little bit of everything for the Midshipmen, and really he showed off his arm in that previous game against SMU when they got down in a pretty big deficit to the Mustangs, and he had to throw the ball a lot more. And he has an arm. He's been able to do a lot more for Navy than you have in some of the years past. Honestly, he's probably the best quarterback since they had Malcolm Perry back in the 2019 season. And just overall, when you look at the stats, and the most important thing with Navy is they don't turn the ball over often. It's one of the biggest things that they talk about, just being one of those military schools. The discipline is something that's really big with Navy, and they don't really make a lot of mistakes. So it's going to be crucial for Houston themselves to be disciplined, something that Donovan Mutin said. Not allow yourself to get tricked with all the disguise that they do, with all the different options, the different play actions, the different stuff. And it's going to be a tough task for Houston.
It's going to be a tough task, and I think it's a really good point that Donovan Mutin said as far as the speed that you can't replicate in practice. You can practice it in practice, but when you get on the field and gaining speed, it's so much faster because their execution is so much smoother. They know what they're doing versus someone in practice you're still thinking, so you can only go so fast. And to them, it's like second nature. And so I think that's a really big key. But for Houston, they see this offense every year. They have plenty of film on what to do and how to beat it successfully. But I think their quarterback is a key. I did watch that game against SMU, and he can throw the football in. He's a big guy, and those receivers, they're short, they're stocky and fast, and those running backs. And so they can make explosive plays, and they're going to go for it. They don't turn the ball over, but they do go for it on fourth down a lot, in which that's a turnover on downs, in which Houston must capitalize in the moments when they get those stops and get good field position, and get in the red zone. And so Houston, I expect them to be able to. SMU put up big explosive plays on them. I think Houston can do the same thing.
Absolutely, and I think really that's really where we're going to put the task with Houston and see if they can move the ball, especially through the air, and that's going to be a tough task. Something that Dana Holgorsen said about what they do on defense, pretty similar to their offense, but they do a very good job of disguising everything that they're going to do, is what Holgorsen said. They do a lot of stuff of showing one thing. They are really good when it comes to blitzes and really just confusing that trickery component. So Clayton's going to have he's going to have a lot cut out for him, trying to not necessarily decipher, but yeah, that's, for lack of a better phrase, decipher what the defense is doing and put the offense on the right situation, and with the help of the coaches as well. But in particular, when it comes to Navy and the direct quote that Donovan Mutin said when it was how do you prepare for Navy, is just do your best, because like I mentioned, in terms of not really being able to know about that speed until you see them on the field. But I think overall you bring up a great point, and SMU kind of showed the blueprint in terms of being able to move the ball against them. It's going to be interesting to see how Houston adjusts, and if we do see a lot more of that pass first offense, something that Clayton Tune kind of hinted at, and we talked about in the previous segment, but just overall in general, I don't think this might be one of those games where Houston can't win the time of possession battle, just in terms of how Navy likes to run things. They're much more of especially when, again, going back to that battle in the trenches. That's something that they do, not for a living, but they do it all the time. So they're really used to it. They know how to really win not only those battles in the trenches, but just overall the physical battle. And that's going to be a tough task for Houston overall. Is there anything else you want to add just in terms of that matchup against Navy and some of the tough challenges that they're going to see early on against Midshipmen?
Yeah, I think I expect Navy to win the time of possession battle, but I think Houston must win the scoreboard and must have explosive plays and
Yeah.
Execute really well in the red zone. I think Clayton Toon and the offense will see them be aggressive early and look to jump out on Navy and get up against Navy. So I think we might see that pass happy offense trying to create some explosive plays early, see if we can get a lead and force Navy to kind of play catch up. That way, it isn't so much of them in the lead and we're trying to kind of catch up to them and letting them run out the clock. So I think that might be the philosophy for Houston this weekend.
For sure. That's a great point you bring up, just in terms of overall what you mentioned in the past. The Midshipmen do a really good job of being able to control something that they did a good job in previous years, being able to take that advantage and really have Navy be the team that's playing from behind. That's really a big advantage for Houston. One final thing I did want to add, just in terms of the matchup against the Midshipmen. Once again, it's going to be an 11 a.m. kickoff. It will be broadcast on ESPNU. Once again, 11 a.m. kickoff. Don't go anywhere. Coming right up on Pawd Slama Jama. We'll talk more about the men's basketball season and their high AP poll ranking. Once again, don't go anywhere. You're listening to Pawd Slama Jama. This time we had a really quick break, no live ad reads to add, but like I mentioned at the top of the show, the University of Houston Cougars men's basketball team came in at number 3 in the AP poll in the first preseason poll from the Associated Press. They rounded out the top 10 with number 1, North Carolina, number 2, Gonzaga. Like you just mentioned, Houston was number 3. Kentucky was number 4. Kansas, the reigning national champions, was at number 5. They were tied actually with Baylor, another fellow Big 12 opponent. Both of those teams had the same amount of votes when it came to 1,200. Duke was at 7th, UCLA at 8, Clayton at 9, and Arkansas rounded out the top 10 when it came to the first preseason Associated Press poll. Now, Houston was the only team in the American Athletic Conference to be ranked in the top 25 early on. Just real quickly, Memphis was the only other team in the American Athletic Conference, by the way. They received votes. But just real quickly, overall initial reactions on Houston being ranked high. I think it's something we've talked about in the past, and really the respect that the team has nationally. Really, you're seeing a lot of that respect that a lot of the different national outlets have for what Kelvin Sampson and the Houston coaching staff has been able to establish here in Houston.
Yeah, and I think it's a reflection and a respect of the program, what they've been able to sustain throughout these last, 3 or 4 seasons, and how many years that's been. And so I think that's a reflection of that, as well as what they have coming back into this season. So I think it's a respect factor for the program and a projection on what's to come, because the team has a lot coming back this season. Headlined by Marcus Sasser. You got to start there. And then as well as Jamal Shedd and then Tremont Mark coming back, and all the other newcomers like Jarris Walker, and then the names goes on. And so I wasn't really surprised. I expected us to be in that top 5. And I expected North Carolina to be number 1 because they bring just about everything back as well. Gonzaga has Timmy back. And so not surprised with them being there too. And so no really surprises for me. I think Houston is right where I expect them to be in that top 5. And now it's about sustaining that, proving that right, and going through the year.
Yeah, interesting you bring up Timmy. It seems like he's been around with Gonzaga for a while now. But yeah, like you mentioned, those certainly, I think much more so just to see Houston in the conversation with them again. It shows the overall respect of the program. It's something we're going to hear in the clip from Kelvin Sampson, one of the lead assistant coach with the Houston Cougars. It's more of a testament of the guys that came before this year's team, because the story of this team hasn't been written yet. It's much more of what's the national pundits, what all the national college basketball followers have that respect for Houston, the coaching staff overall, and what the sustained level of success that they've had last season. And I think really the run they had last year, when you look at no Marcus Sasser, no Tremont Mark, there was at points where they were running a 6-man rotation, 7-man rotations at times, and they were a couple stops away from making back-to-back Final Four appearances. I think that's really what won a lot of respect of just overall, got a lot of, not respect, a lot of attention from national pundits. Here's what Kellen Sampson had to say about being ranked.
Standpoint, I don't know if it's a nice thing and you move on, but it's there.
I don't know if that has as much bearing on this year's team. This year's team's story will be told, over the next 5 months. I think it's pretty good validation that a lot of people believe in our program and believe that what guys have done in the past is put one foot in front of the other, elevate from month to month, and then people believe that by the end, this program has produced teams by March that are a tough one. Will this team do it? We'll wait. Remains to be seen. But if anything else, it's a validation of where the program has come to.
And you've heard your dad talk about just the beginning through the year, and to get to this point where you're mentioned among the Blue Buds.
Sure.
And that's part of the validation part.
100%. I think because we've performed well in some big moments here in the past, a lot of people are, recognizing that we're producing a winner, which is good. Our guys are developing from year to year, and I think a lot of people are counting on a lot of guys developing into something significant this year. And again, those are all program achievements.
So there you heard Kellen Sampson talk about being ranked at high program achievements. Again, really a testament to what Houston has been able to build the last couple of years and that success. And I'm going to bring up a comment from MH on YouTube. And this is an interesting question. I'm going to let you take it first, Da'Yon. Do you feel that UH will go through the American Athletic Conference unchallenged? This is the weakest the AAC has looked in a long time. Cincinnati, SMU, and Memphis are all weaker than they have been in a long time.
Nah, I disagree with that. Can you pull it back up?
Yes.
Yeah. Do I feel like that? No, because Memphis is going to challenge them. They had added Kendrick Davis to a veteran group with DeAndre Williams, as well as the other guard. His name just skips my mind right now, coming back. He's a senior, 5th-year senior. Then Cincinnati is going to be well with Wes Miller. They got some good recruits. And then Tulane is going to be really, really good with Jalen Cook and Forbes and their entire group. And so, no, I think if the AAC, the American, will challenge them just like it's done the last couple of years. Well, before they get into the tournament, it's going to challenge them well. When they get into the tournament, they'll be ready. And so I don't think so at all. But to my opinion on what Kellen was saying, I think one thing that really stuck out to me, what he said, is the way that they've been able to develop players year by year. And their ranking is a testament of that, because it's players coming back whom they're foreseeing the development for them to take another step, like a Jamal Shead, who played really well in the tournament, and coming back. When you add the likes of Marcus Sasser and Tremont and the other entire group around Marcus Sasser, I think they're seeing his potential, his development to take an even further step and add to the program even more. And then you got the likes of Jarris Walker. I mean, you see the development before him with Fabian White, Justin Gorham, Devin Davis. And so I think with him stepping into that role and his skill set and everything that he's going to be able to do, people are seeing the potential development there as well. And so I really like that clip for him. And I think Houston, man, I can't wait to see what they look like as a team this year.
Absolutely. And just to add on, going back to the comment or the question posed by MH, and I think you make a great point, especially when you mentioned a lot of those teams. In particular, the guard you were talking about was Alex Lomax, who's going to be returning for Memphis. And also, they're still bringing back DeAndre Williams, who he gave Houston a lot of fits a season ago. And like you mentioned, it always seems like
he's playing college basketball.
Yeah, and he's a player that Kelvin Sampson has been really high on for the last few seasons, and I think he shouted him out. If I'm remembering correctly, he shouted him out this during the American Athletic Conference Media Day just last week. So Memphis is going to be there. And you mentioned Tulane and another head coach that Calvin Sampson has been high on, in Ron Hunter. I mean, they're bringing back Jalen Cook. I mean, Trey Williams is a player that gave Houston some fits last season, and they're going to be on the come up after another year of experience in their belt. So I think the American Athletic Conference, maybe it's not in traditional when you think of the teams in the past, like UCF has continued. I mean, they've been down the last couple of seasons, but going back early on when Houston first was kind of building up to where they are now, UCF was one of those teams that was always in contention with a lot of those teams, in particular when they had Taco Fall. Wichita State has kind of fallen off, but I think you're seeing a lot of those other teams that are starting to build up. And I think overall it's going to be a challenge, especially when you have to play those teams on the road. It's going to be a tough task for Houston now. The final clip that we're going to play here is on Jamal Shead. He's going to be talking a little bit about those AP rankings, and he'll also talk about what the focus of the Cougars is with, like I mentioned, there are 2.5 weeks left until the regular season tips off against Northern Colorado on November 7th. Here's what Jamal Shead had to say about the high ranking.
Because, in fact, coach really doesn't really base anything off of blue buds, any of this. You know, we just come out and compete every night, and that's what coach really wants, and we try to follow that lead.
He probably didn't even mention the preseason bowl today, did he?
He doesn't care. He does not care. He just focuses on what's ahead, which is our scrimmage on Saturday, and that's all we've talked about. We don't even talk about conference yet.
How nice is it to have an opportunity before the season starts to get two tough programs, just to, to see where you guys are at before the season starts?
Y'all weren't supposed to know about that. But no, it's going to be a good test for us, because they're really good in what they do and their aspect and their conferences. But, it's going to be a good test for us before we get on the court.
Jamal Shead right there hinting at the not-so-secret scrimmages that have been reported. It was first reported by Jeff Goodman of the stadium where Houston's going to scrimmage Texas, and the big one, Duke, which obviously has fans excited, but those scrimmages will be behind closed doors. But I think that's really, that in and of itself in particular speaks highly of where Houston is again in the national standard, that those programs, obviously Texas with Chris Beard and the relationship he has with Kelvin Sampson, but I think Duke in particular is just showing how they feel that even though it's scrimmage, they're a program that they can get better with when it comes to competing with Houston. Again, it's just another sign of where the program has come in the last few years. But I think most importantly, what you heard from Jamal Shead in that clip, it starts at the top from Calvin Sampson. And he couldn't care less about any of those preseason rankings or the quote term blue blood or anything of those programs. He's much more focused on the team now, where they need to grow, and in particular what needs to be done as the season progresses. And he said, we're still in October. One of the things he said during training camp is that this is his favorite month because right now they're still in a teaching mode, especially with all the new faces that they have bringing in, teaching them the expectations, the culture of the program, and continuing to grow as the season progresses.
Yep. Then you get into defining roles and building game plans, and I'm sure all of that it feels very good to Coach Sampson. And so, I'm excited to see it. I think this is going to be one of the best teams, the more versatile teams that Houston has had, probably even one of the most athletic teams that Houston has had as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Another question by MH. He asked, how many tournament teams do you see coming out of the American? Just wondering, since it's time to make preseason predictions and how they hold up throughout the season. So I'll take a crack at this one first. I think certainly you got to pencil in, obviously, Houston in there. I think last season it was only two, Kirk. It was Houston and Memphis that made the tournaments. I'm trying to remember if an American team made it in one of the first 4 in or 4 out games, but I know for sure it was Houston and Memphis. I think it'll be a multi-bid league again this year, and I could see, I'm gonna say 3 team make it. I think Tulane gets in. I think Tulane puts up together a strong season just because of what they have, the talent overall returning. I think Memphis will get in. They always seem like they start off strong. Now they're going to have a really tough non-conference schedule, which has always been the case with Penny Hardaway there and that non-conference portion of the schedule. But it always seems like they pick up late throughout the season. And Houston and Memphis aren't going to play. This is the final year in the American, but it always seems like the conference has scheduled where those 2 teams don't meet until the latter part of the season. And obviously, I have Houston penciled in to make the NCAA tournament. What say you?
I'm gonna say 3 locks and potentially 4. I think Cincinnati is going to take a leap this year. I like some of the things that they've done over there. So I think Tulane gets in for sure. Memphis and Houston, of course. I think all 3 of them are locks. I'm going to go a maybe with a 4. Like this is kind of spades. Maybe 4.
For sure. But, I agree. I think the American Athletic Conference will be much more competitive. And I think just overall, it seems like year in and year out, there's always a team, and even going back to the 2019-20 season, Tulsa was one of those teams that, heading into the season, there wasn't a lot of expectations on them, and they made a big noise. They ended up being, if I remember correctly, they ended up winning a share of the regular season conference championship. Obviously, that was a year that got canceled by COVID, and then in that shortened season, Wichita State, or not the shortened season, in the COVID season, when Houston made the Final Four, Wichita State made that run, and they were actually the ones that finished with the outright regular season championship. Obviously, Houston was able to win the postseason American Athletic Conference championship. So there always seems to be a wild card team in the mix too that makes a push during the season. So I agree. I think it's going to be a multi-bid league. Certainly, they have the talent, both when it comes to the player perspective and the coach's perspective in the American. So I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, Da'Yon, 3 locks and potentially 4. But that's going to do it for today's episode. So if you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Pawd Slama Jama YouTube channel, for your one-stop shop for UH Cougars football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. When you scroll through the feed, there's a whole bunch of different videos. We played clips from Jamal Shed and Kellen Sampson. If you want to see those full clips, and more clips from Reggie Chaney. I was able to interview him one-on-one. He talked about the surgeries that he underwent during the off season. He had his knee scoped. He had his hand surgery. It's pretty interesting because he said he played through all of that season and he could not form. Like, this was the most he said. Yeah, he said that was the most he could clench his arm. So that's going to be interesting. That was an interesting interview. Just a lot of content that you can check out. We have the full interview with Jarvis Walker as well. And
exclusive. Not anywhere else.
Yeah, that is true. Exclusive when it comes to Reggie Chaney. A lot of these clips, there's a couple of clips of Doug Belk as well and head coach Dana Holgorsen. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, your one-stop shop for Houston Cougars football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. And also be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We're trying more stuff. And actually, we just had a video that popped over 13,000 views last time I checked, which is pretty cool right there. And on Instagram and TikTok, it is Let's Rage Cougs, all lowercase, just LETSRAGECOOGS. And of course, follow us on Twitter at Pawd Slama Jama, at PAWDSLAMJAMA. Thank you for all of you guys that tuned in live. Michael, Maya, MH, Boom D. Thank you for the appearance and thank you for thanking us. We appreciate you guys' support. As always, Dan, I'm gonna toss it over to you for the final word, sir.
Like Andy said, thank you guys for your support. Be sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got exclusive interviews that you won't see anywhere else. And you can't end the episode without saying "Go Cougs," baby.